Welcome everyone to Melfuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Stranger Things Season 5. This is the first batch of episodes 1 through 4, which I decided to watch all 4 of and just sit and talk about the whole drop. It's really convenient for me to split this into 3 drops, honestly. And like I always say, weekly would be even better, but it's fine. You know, we're here. It was fun. I ended up staying up far too late, because I planned on watching 2 episodes, going to bed, and then watching the episodes 3 and 4 before recording. But I was so invested that I ended up staying up silly late watching all 4 episodes, and given that, you know, episode 3 is like over an hour and then episode 4 is like 90 minutes pretty much, I was up pretty late. So I guess up front, that's a good sign. It's a good sign that I was that into it that I just would not stop. I even tried going to bed in between episodes 2 and 3, and I just had to keep watching. So, I mean, mark of excitement, if nothing else, with that. And I'm pretty happy with these 4 episodes so far. I'm loving a lot of what they're doing this season. It's great to have Stranger Things back. It's great to be with these characters one last time. There is a couple critiques I'm going to throw at it. There's one particular moment that I think is a bit weak, and then there's one kind of plot line in episode 4 that I think is pretty weak, which I'll talk about. Now, knowing this show, they'll probably turn it around eventually, and things will be fine later. But, and it's not like this show has been immune to having like one plot thread, when we've got like 4 or 5 going on at the same time, or sometimes one's a bit weaker. It's not that strange, but I just wanted to bring that up front. There's going to be a couple of critiques, but for the most part, I'm super into it. And I think the thing that was really hitting me, especially when I was getting into episode 2, is I love the vibe of a final season. There's something about when a TV show has reached that point where we know it's ending and it's getting to end on its own terms, where they know going in, they've written a story that's going to conclude it all. Sometimes it's a bit more mapped out than others, but regardless, when you go into what you know is the final season and you sort of realize that, one, it's the last time I'm going to see all these characters together, right? Barring any, you know, weird spin-offs that might happen, but like, this is the end of the main story of Stranger Things, regardless of whatever, you know, cash cow milking schemes they came up with at Netflix for the future. But you also go in knowing, well, bigger things can happen here, right? Like, characters aren't maybe quite as safe as they once were. And that's not to say there's not moments of plot armor or anything like that, but it just means that they might kill some important people off this season. It's possible they will. And side characters are very vulnerable, especially, like, to be honest, there's a couple of characters that look like they were going to die at the start of episode 2, and I'm almost surprised that at least one of them didn't yet. It's possible they may still go in the hospital. And obviously spoilers for the episode. I don't know if I said that, like, you know, straight up at the start, but just be clear here. Spoilers for episodes 1 to 4 of the new season. But those vibes have been a little bit just more on edge, a little bit more like, oh, things are really coming together. And I think one of the things that I remember talking a lot about in season 4 Stranger Things is that even with that season, it felt like it aged up quite a bit. Like it was aging with the age of the characters on the show, where it was allowed to be a little bit darker and almost more, basically, kind of R-rated at points, with the level of threat, where you go back to season 1, the kids are in danger at points, but it does kind of feel a bit more closer to like an ET or something like that, where the kids are kind of in this jeopardy, but you sort of like feel it in the back of your gut that they're probably going to be fine. There's a feel-good kind of element to it for the most part. But then you get to season 4 rather, and you have this Freddy Krueger style villain killing them, and it's more visual, it's more brutal. It feels like the characters who were once 11 years old are now at an age where we can basically put them through violence, and it's acceptable now. So you feel that, I think, going from season 1 to 4, and then 5 is just kind of ramping that up further, where there's a couple of the moments in episode 4 that's maybe the goriest the show's ever been, and it doesn't feel like it's holding back, to the point where there's a moment or two where I thought they might drop an F-bomb, and it wouldn't actually shock me if they did drop an F-bomb by the time we get to the end of the season. I don't think they're going to, but it wouldn't shock me. Like, the level of violence that's sometimes happening, not just to like CG creatures either, like people are getting brutalized in various ways. It would not completely shatter my, you know, expectations if people start, so, you know, if there was one big F-bomb towards the end or something. But anyway, Regardless, obviously I'm here to talk about these 4 episodes, and it's always tough talking about multiple episodes at once because I'm never going to like go into every scene or every detail or whatever. I'll probably try and stick with kind of topics and talk about set pieces a little bit and maybe some overall kind of feelings and where I think it's going and what I liked and the couple of things that are a bit weaker. Which maybe I'll start with those. Maybe I'll get the negative stuff out of the way just to have it done and we can just enjoy the rest of this. So there's actually 2 things in these 4 episodes, 2 times where they sort of tease something and I immediately went, oh, that'll be this. And then a character tried to say it would be something else, only for the reveal to end up being in a twist that I was initially right, that it was the first thing I thought it was going to be. And the first of these 2, I think, is particularly egregious. And that is the reveal at the end of episode 2 that Mr. Whatsit, that young Holly being Mike and Nancy's little sister. Sorry, this is the thing when you come back to a show and there's like 50 characters, right? I remember them pretty well, honestly. I'm shocked that Holly's sticking in my brain, to be honest. But their little sister Holly has been seeing someone that no one else can see called Mr. Whatsit, and as soon as they showed that she was talking to someone invisible, I immediately went, well, that's Vecna, right? And not in a way where I was disappointed. It made sense. He's targeted teenagers last season. He's going for younger kids this season. And the opening of episode 1 here actually shows you more of Will, the night Will was taken in season 1, with I assume is a different actor, maybe with some digital sort of trying to connect the dots a little bit, but I think it's just a different actor playing young Will. And it's basically this idea that he's trying to do whatever he was trying to do originally with Will, but it didn't work with just one kid, and he's maybe going for 12 this time. Maybe that's getting into some theorizing there, but it didn't seem out of character that he was trying to do this. It made sense it was Vecna. It was not a bad direction to go in. But then in episode 2, as it plays out, Mike gets the idea, and I like that he's smart enough to piece together that this Mr. Whatsit's maybe a part of all this, and he's like, hey, she's been talking to an imaginary friend, and then she disappears, and I don't believe in coincidences, blah, 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 and he kind of convinces Nancy to get on board with this idea. But what surprised me is that he doesn't go, oh, he's the danger, he's like what's like led to her being taken. He seems to think it's a separate new entity that he doesn't know about that might be able to help find his sister. They kind of run with that a little bit, and it's not like they have a ton of information, so they don't feel like too dumb for thinking this necessarily, but it didn't really have a lot of weight to me as a viewer. I felt like, this feels like this was more like kind of a grooming type thing, and I don't know, the vibes never quite sat. So I think this one's more egregious because the end of episode 2 plays that as the ending with the big reveal that it's Vecna, that it's Henry, and he's the one who's been talking to Holly, and they do this thing where it's intercutting amongst different characters, finding out different parts of this, which they've done before for big reveals. It's a solid thing to do, but because this was such an obvious thing up front of what this was going to be, it felt weird to treat it like this big reveal here. I mean, to be fair, it's not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things because it's a very early thing, right? If this was the end of episode 6 or 7 doing a big reveal that felt like this, see Gen V season 2 for what that feels like, actually. A very recent example of me feeling exactly that, get into the last episode of the season. That'd be very different. Here, it's end of episode 2. We're still very much in the setup phase of everything, so it's not a huge deal. But it did stick out to me as it was unraveling at the end of episode 2. I'm like, oh, this is kind of like they're trying to pretend that this is some huge revelation, and I feel like it was the very first thing my mind went to. The second time I felt this way, which is not another critique for the record. This one I think is okay. This is not my other critique. But I'll just mention it here because I said there was 2 where I kind of like predicted something like that immediately. And that was the idea that the military base inside the Upside Down has something behind this big metal door. And 11, when she's doing her psychic probing and whatnot, is convinced that it's Vecna, and they've somehow weaponized Vecna's powers to create what they're calling her kryptonite, which is these like sound cannon things that fire at her and kind of make her, writhe in pain, and she can't use her powers. We'll get into all that, but she thinks Vecna's in there. What's funny about that is that when they first showed the door, before she gave her ideas of what she thought was in there, I immediately said, and to be fair, I don't think this is one that everyone's going to jump to. I don't think this is as obvious as the other one, But honestly, my thinking was because I didn't read the visuals that they were showing me as this was the source of like this weapon they've got against Elle. I took this as no, they know this weapon works because they're using it on someone else, and my mind went to what turned out to be right amazingly was is it Callie from season 2? Because I was thinking before I started watching the season that it would be kind of weird if they don't bring that character up again, because otherwise they've just completely forgotten about it. And I know people weren't that hot in that episode, and even me in hindsight I wasn't like hot in that episode because of its placement, because of the kind of the plot it was involved in. The idea of there being another character out there who has powers that Elle can relate to or whatever, like that's fine. Like that was never a bad idea, but the execution and the placement of it was always kind of off-putting to people. But that ends up being what it is. Like that's a reveal like late in episode 4 is that is who's in there. But Elle's instinct is to immediately say, oh, they've got Vecna in there, and that's why we can't find them, because the military have got him. But immediately as soon as she said that, I was thinking, but that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense with what he's doing. However, this isn't as bad as the other one for a couple of reasons. One, it's not like, I don't think it's as painfully obvious, for one. Two, I think that if she's right, while it is a little bit not making sense up front, it's an interesting idea that maybe Vecna's somehow doing stuff from within imprisonment, and the military already have him. Like, that could be potentially an interesting plot to go down if that's what it was. It isn't, but it wasn't like necessarily an off-putting idea. And I think another thing that makes it not as bad is that Hopper actually kind of voices what I was thinking. He says, wait, does that make sense? Like, how is he doing all this where he's hunting kids if the military have got him down here? And Elle just kind of like shrugs it off because she's so like headstrong and determined, a stubborn punk ass, as he puts it. So someone does voice the concern. So when it turns out that he's right and she's wrong, it's like, okay, she's being young, she's being too headstrong, and he was right to like be skeptical of it. So it doesn't feel like the audience was left like, you know, hovering this weird place where we disagree with all the characters. So, you know, all things considered, I think that one didn't bother me. It was much better in terms of a reveal, even though I kind of got where it was going. And I don't think most people necessarily guess that the character that's in there, but I think most people will say, I don't think it's Vecna in there. Like that's the part that I think most people will probably feel when Elle brings this idea up. But yeah, so that's that. And then the other critique, so the one critique is the end of episode 2 reveal being a bit flat, because I think it was very, very obvious. The other critique I have, and this is a little bit sad because it's kind of like the ongoing story of an exciting moment. So the exciting moment being the return of Max in episode 3 at the end, which is that she is in what is clearly a mind prison of some kind, Vecna's subconscious. That's where she's been trapped while she's in a coma, and they held off until the end of episode 3, and that's where Holly is. Sadly, I think pretty much everything in Max's plot in episode 4 is kinda lame. Not because she's doing anything wrong per se, not because the characters aren't engaging. I actually kind of like the chemistry between her and like her being like a mentor, big sister to Holly, and giving her a mission that's going to like put her in danger because it's the only option they have. I like all that like setup of it. It's just that most of this plot kind of just turns into Max explaining what's been happening when she's been in a coma, and it's all just cutting to flashbacks as she's telling the story, and it's like the most just kind of pedestrian, boring way to convey information ever, as a character just sitting down and narrating it and showing some snippets of it. It just wasn't like that interesting. Especially this show is so good at balancing so many plots and characters and having them all matter to each other and intertwine in points, and it's very good pacing and momentum. And then you get to this and it's just story time with Max, and it just feels like everything grinds to a halt to hear a story, and it doesn't quite work in the pacing, I feel like. Now the episode's like almost 90 minutes long, like I said, so the percentage of the episode that's made up of it, relatively, there's still so much stuff to love in episode 4 that it doesn't drag the whole episode down, but it's definitely the weakest part of the season, I think, so far. But again, like, I'm not worried. Like, now that they've actually set something up, now that like Holly's going to go back and pretend that she doesn't know who Henry/Vecna is, and that she's going to try and still pretend like she's friends with him, so Max can act out her plan. Now it's them being proactive, which is my favorite thing about Stranger Things, is characters being proactive and forming plans, executing on them. You know, I love a good montage of them setting traps, a lot of that in episode 3, but even in episode 1, and one of my favourite things as we started this season off, is that we're not starting with the group all fractured and splintered off and in different places, and not only are they all still in Hawkins, and that was kind of true in season 3 as well, to be fair, but not only are they still in Hawkins together, but I love that they're being proactive before the show even starts. They talk about doing the crawl, but this isn't their first crawl. This isn't the first time that they've snuck Hopper into the Upside Down to go and try and find Vecna so they can put an end to this once and for all. This is like number 37 or something like that, they said. They've been doing this for a year. They've built up a plan where everyone's got a place in the structure of it, except notably kind of Will, because Joyce has been too protective and a couple other people, but most of the people have something to do here, whether it's, you know, being the lookout at the military base so he can sneak in, whether it's, you know, keeping track of where he is in the van with the tracker, because they can track with this tracking device between the real world and the Upside Down. All of it felt like such a cool thing where other seasons of this show might have built up to them coming up with this plan, and this season has them coming up with plans after this, but I kind of love that we hit the ground running with them already in, no, we're trying to solve things here, because we did leave off season 4 in a sort of call to action of things are getting bad and so on, which I guess I should talk a little bit about the status quo of Hawkins and what's going on. The military have quarantined the town, so if you didn't leave when you had a chance, presumably right after last season, you're kind of stuck here. They've put a giant metal kind of... they call it a band-aid, I guess I'd call it a plaster, but yeah, I mean, neither word even feels that fitting, but like they've basically closed up that gap that was formed in the ground. And there's a military base in the middle of the town square with a giant opening to the Upside Down that they open up and go into, and the big reveal later on is that Linda Hamilton's character is the lead doctor in the military base inside the Upside Down. So this is kind of where we start off the season. Robin has taken over the radio station. She's rocking Robin, which is a really neat way of getting a lot of exposition out, is that she's basically talking to the town and talking about the rules, about how, you know, comply with the military, don't try and leave, don't do this, don't do that. And the thing is that they even give a little reason why she's saying all this after the fact, where they say that she's saying all this because she got into a little bit of trouble for some of the stuff she was saying. And she's basically been told by the military that she'll be cut off and not allowed to broadcast if she doesn't say things like, you know, not propaganda per se, but just like promote compliance, basically. And they reference that. And so even just like that setup was a good fun vibe. The vibe in the house when everyone was waking up and you realize that Joyce and her family are all living with Mike's family, and like everyone's cramped together in the basement or whatever. It feels just like there's an instant energy to everything. And to be fair, this show's always been good at having the instant energy, for the most part. Sometimes it likes to sort of build things up and bring them together. This season, it feels like shit's already hitting the fan by the end of episode 1. And I think the big thing about episode 1, more than anything, is that obviously it focuses a little bit more on Holly, the little sister, right? And obviously it's been, you know, 4 or 5 years since season 1 at this point. She's went from being whatever age she was to what age she is now, which is about 10, I think. So almost the age of the kids in the first season, actually, which is fun. In the same way that we've enjoyed seeing Erica, because Erica, I love that when we get to episode 3, because they hold Erica back a little bit. I guess they've just got too many characters. They had to like let us wait for Erica. But I love that they showed that Erica's actually in the junior high with the same teacher from, you know, season 1 and 2. I love that they're showing she's at that stage of her life now. Now, admittedly, one of the subjects getting into this season that everyone won't shut up about is the age of the actors. And I just do not care, really, right? Erica sticks out a little bit more because she's still supposed to be, you know, younger, right? And she's actually 18 now. I mean, she was probably 17 or whatever when they shot this, but she sticks out as looking a bit too old. I think all of the original kids, yes, they're all like 28 to 22 or whatever, right? Shooting this season, whatever the age they are. But the funny thing is, though, is that most stuff set in high schools have actors those ages playing those roles. It's actually rare to have the real ages. So I actually think there's a wonderful irony to this, that they started off with real kids for season 1, but by the time they get to the last season and they're still supposed to be playing 17, closing in on 18-year-olds, I kind of love that they've become what the normal is, especially for the 80s when this is set, which is you have 25-year-olds playing kids. Well, teenagers specifically, not young children, obviously. So it doesn't bother me. Like, Erica's maybe the only one that stuck out. I know obviously Holly's a different actor and maybe there's a little bit of a weird jump. I would be curious to go back and check how much you see of Holly in, like, say, season 4, right? I wonder if they knew if they were going to make her a bigger deal in 5 with a new actress, because obviously the original actor either might have not been still in acting, or maybe was the wrong age now, or whatever the case is. I do wonder if they intentionally tried to keep her off screen a little bit on the build up to season 5, so we can just remember what she looked like when she was more like a 4-year-old or 5-year-old back in, like, season 1. There's a little bit of fudging the numbers here. That's fine. Whatever. I think it's too much of a fun idea to see, like, the younger siblings come into their own, the same way that Erica has, and now we have Holly. And I think, episode 1 focusing quite a bit on Holly, reminding us she's there, showing her interact with the other siblings. Notably, there's that big scene she has with Mike where he comes to pick her up at school and he sits down and gives her the idea, he explains some of the classes of D&D, but says, no, I was going to wait until you were a bit older, but here's your little game piece. You're Holly the Heroic, and you're a cleric, I think he said. And basically gives her a little pep talk. And it's a really nice sequence, and one of the things I actually really like about episode 2 as well is that there's a lot of Mike and Nancy as a pair. Because obviously they're siblings, but the show hasn't spent a lot of time with them paired off alone, right? I remember in season 1 they had a couple of cool interactions in the finale, but they'd been mostly separate other than the family scenes up until that point. I really like now that once the parents are in trouble, I love the 2 older kids being like, oh, we've got to, like, be the adults here, we've got to mature up and we have to go save our sister, kind of thing. I love them having to actually, like, I love the mixing and matching of the groupings a little bit, so that we're getting some dynamics that we haven't before, and it's kind of nice that we finally get this sibling pair between them. But on the subject that I was saying, though, is that him with young Holly, is that was a scene where I'm like, okay, they're going to use her as the conduit to sort of, like, because so often when you get to, like, a season 5, season 6 of a show and it's the final season, a final season always loves calling back to season 1, right? They love making references to the first couple of episodes because it feels like a full circle type thing. And it's really neat that the young sibling of a couple of the main characters is about the age that the kids were in the first season, so it feels like it's got that natural kind of, full circle quality to it. So you get to keep a little bit of that childlike quality in parts of the show, even if, like, the other characters are all grown up and it's a much bit darker, and there's more menace and threats involved, there's more murder going on. You do get to have at least a couple of characters who are that young age, and it's even nice that by episode 4 the entire group of, like, main characters pretty much are trying to save a bunch of kids who are about the age they were in season 1. I think they're like a year younger. I think they were 11 in season 1 and these kids are all like 9 or 10. So it's close, but it's close enough where it kind of feels neat that they have grown up now, and now they're the protectors of the kids who were the age they used to be when the show started. I really like that kind of quality to it. But the other thing this scene does, and the focus on Holly does this episode, is that it let you know that she's going to be a big deal this season, and it set you up for the ending. Like, this was too, like, good of a heartwarming, like, we're establishing that Mike looks after his little sister, that he's not a dick to her, he cares about her, so that when she's put in jeopardy, it matters, and we know that he cares. Now, it would have also been nice for Nancy to have a scene with her little sister, but I understand why they didn't do it. I think if you did it with both of them, if both Nancy and Mike got a scene with Holly in episode 1 of a similar kind of, like, oh, I'm going to be a big sibling and say something inspiring or, helpful to you, I think it would have been too, like, oh, like, she's getting kidnapped. Like, it would have been too obvious. I think if you're good at reading how plots are playing out and you're good at script structure and the signs, I think it's relatively obvious if you're paying attention still. But I think it would be too on the nose if both older siblings got, like, a heart-to-heart with Holly before she was kidnapped. So, I get that they picked Mike, and I think the reason why they picked Mike over Nancy for this is that I think Mike inherently because he's the boy, so he's maybe just generally a bit more of a shithead than his big sister. I think it's like more of the idea of like you go to the one who's the most polar extreme opposite of Holly out of the two, and that's more Mike than Nancy because he's further away, further removed from her. So I really like that sequence, and obviously once it, you know, we get to the end and Will's having these visions and he's like, oh, they're going to the Wheeler house. That's where they're going, and everyone's like sort of like, you know, racing there, kind of thing. The first episode cliffhanger is obviously the Demogorgon, you know, showing up to nab Holly, which leads into the cold open of episode 2, which a lot of people are talking about. It's one of the standout sequences of the season. It's so funny because I actually think episode 2 overall might be my least favorite of the 4. Not because it's bad by any means. There's a lot of good stuff in it, but it definitely felt like the energy slowed down after the opening. It was like, okay, we need to take a breather and like set stuff up now. But the opening is so bombastic, though. Everyone was raving about episode 2, from what I could see. I mean, it's not been that long, but from what I could tell, everyone's like really talking about the opening of episode 2, and it is good. It's a good opening. It's tense. It's all these things, and it's exciting because characters who have never been aware of all the stuff going on in this show are now involved in it, and that being the Wheeler parents, right? And Karen specifically, like, I loved kind of the duality of this, where they were kind of coming off as like really kind of crappy parents. Like, she's drinking and yelling about how the dad doesn't even know her age, and he's getting mad and he's storming out, and she's just drinking more wine, and Holly's crying in her room, you know, towards the end of episode 1. It all feels a little bit like, you know, just crappy, like, atmosphere, crappy parenting, whatever you want to call it. And I love the idea, though. It wasn't about like just setting them up to be completely useless, right? Oh, I mean, okay, the dad kind of gets shoved to the side, but Karen gets kind of a strong showing here, through this, where she not only does she have the moment where when she finally realizes there is a monster and her daughter's not just having a you know, a bad dream or whatever, she, you know, she pulls her under the bathtub, but they're hiding in the water. That's a great shot when that happens, so that's great stuff. But when they try and run away, and before, the thing that we were kind of judging her for as an audience, which was the over drinking and like emptying the bottle and all that, when she grabs that bottle and smashes it on the counter and tries to take on a Demogorgon by herself with a broken bottle of wine, and she gets in a couple of hits. Like, she like goes for it. She stabs this thing or slashes it like 3 or 4 times, before she gets, you know, well, we actually cut away, and then we get, it's after obviously Nancy sees the body lying there, that we get the flashbacks to the actual like attack on her, which is like one to the stomach and one to the neck. And I thought, oh, she's dying. Like, she's going to lie there saying, hey, Holly's in danger, and then croak. Like, I really thought that's what was about to happen. That's not what happened. She's in hospital and so on. But like, you know, she put up a fight, right? And she was like, get the hell away from my daughter. Like, I almost thought she was going to drop a get the hell away from her, you bitch, from Aliens, which would have been a very, you know, recent reference. And I don't know if Karen's the type of mom who's going to see Aliens, but it was that kind of moment. She really like kicked into high gear, and it was like, you know what, for all your faults, you put up a goddamn fight. Like, I think you come out of that sequence being like, you know what, for any critique anyone could ever have given you at the entirety of this show, I feel like you earned some cred back with this fight here. And that's actually a recurring thing throughout these episodes, is the rest of the characters who once upon a time needed a living to save them if a Demogorgon was around, were putting these characters in danger with Demogorgons. They're even throwing themselves into situations with Demogorgons, even though they know Elle can't come and save them. They have to like do it on their own, and it feels like a nice natural escalation of everything that, you know, has been building since season 1. You know, it's a natural thing where now there's more of them, and now that the characters have leveled up a little bit and they can take them on to an extent. Obviously they're still dangerous, but I do appreciate kind of the nature of it building up like that. So yeah, I mean, obviously the parents I expect will be mostly out of it for the season. It's kind of interesting, that sequence in episode 2 where Nancy and and might go and speak to their mother. There's a whole little, like, we have to get a disguise and get to her kind of thing, and that's fun enough, but that was kind of the stuff that felt a bit more low energy relative to, like, you know, the stakes that felt so high at the start of the episode. It was very interesting, like, having them kind of have to, like, it's not like they explain everything, but just the tone in the conversation where they're asking her to write things down, and they're asking her questions about this Mr. Watson and whatever else, and they're just like, hey, we're going to go save Holly, and her seeing, like, how competent her kids have been, because, like, from her perspective, like, you know, like, she, you know, she's not seen them save the world, she's not seen them be a part of all these things that have all been secretive in the past seasons. It was kind of interesting of seeing her lying there with a tear in her eye, kind of like putting hope in her older children to go save her young girl. I don't know, I thought there was something really kind of touching about that little moment. So yeah, I mean, that stuff is good. God, I mean, yeah, so much to talk about. Jeez, I'm scratching the surface of some of this stuff. Because obviously once we get to episode 3, the big thing is them trying to save Derek, the dickhead, who's a kid in Holly's class, and there's a whole, like, trap they set for the Demogorgon in episode 3 where they put a tracker on it with a shotgun. There's a lot of setup to this, and you got Murray coming in with the all the contraband, the items they need to pull off their missions. He's allowed to drive in and out with supplies, so he's sneaking them in stuff, and that's all fun. It's fine, you know. It's entertaining. It's always fun seeing Murray kind of interact with some of them. I think when it gets to, like, this trap stuff, though, I really liked it. I love the characters acknowledging how crazy the plan is, because they're effectively going to, like, drug an entire family and kidnap them. Not just the child, but the whole family. And at first that was just the plan, is just kidnap him to save him because he's the next target. And instead, it's like, well, what if we, like, remove them and blindfold them? And I love this. This was something that was constantly happening in these 4 episodes, is that they constantly kept bringing up, like, things that were rules established in previous seasons. The idea that if Vecna or the hive mind are seeing through the eyes of the victim, we can blindfold them, and so they don't know where they are. That was a big thing. Remember when Will was more sort of possessed in season 2, and they put him in the room, and then the heat was another factor. You know, he likes it cold, all that stuff. Like, there's a lot of things that were still coming up here. The way the lights flicker and work when there's a Demogorgon there, like, everything's been kind of remembered, and, like, it feels like they've built, like, a language almost for us to understand all the rules that we've been doing for all these seasons. So the plan's fun. Obviously, they all get weapons. They set up some Home Alone but more deadly style traps, and they've all got a part to play. And their hope is that they'll injure it enough that it'll go back into the Upside Down, but with the tracker, and it'll lead them to where they're keeping Holly and that kind of thing. And it's mostly a lot of fun. I almost feel bad that I'm not going to have much to say about it beyond that, because it takes up a good chunk of the episode, and it's a lot of fun. This is where Erica gets brought into it, because Erica knows the girl, like the older sister of this Derek, and this Derek's a little shithead. He's this little fat kid who's just mean to everyone. His catchphrase is basically go suck a fat dick. Well, maybe not that wording. It's like suck a fat wad, I think he keeps saying. I love Robin's reaction when he says it to her. Like, she's just kind of like flustered, like, wait, what did this child just say to me? Yeah, I like that stuff was fun, and then it does that thing with that Stranger Things does, where it'll introduce a character who seems kind of silly and useless, and that's what this kid is, right? And obviously there's some fun when he wakes up and he's kidnapped, and they have to try and convince him that they're doing it for his own good and all the rest of it. Once we get to episode 4, though, and they realize that they have to use him in a plan, and it's like they all turn and look at him as like he's our only hope. This shitty little kid who's useless is our only hope, and he ends up doing a good job of doing the whole Great Escape thing with all the kids that are kept in the barracks. I'm kind of hoping you've watched the episodes if you're listening to this, because I can't explain everything, right? There's so many like throwaway things where I'm like, should I stop and explain that? And I can't explain everything. But I love that they take this character who's useless, and then by the end of episode 4, you're kind of rooting for him because he's now a part of the team, right? He wasn't as instantly likable as someone like Erica back when they started using her more in season 3 or whatever, but he makes that turn where you're like, oh, this chubby little kid's going to help save these other children, so I'm kind of rooting for him now. And he's doing a pretty competent job, all things considered. So, I was into that. Which speaking of characters, one character that did not work for me, and I am so delighted I have not seen yet this season, is Argyle. I think that was his name. The stoner dude from last season. He was the big thing I didn't like about last season was that character. I am delighted that I have not seen him yet. Maybe he'll have a cameo later, but it does not feel like they're factoring him in as a main player at all. And I am perfectly content with that. Thank you very much. So that's good stuff. Yeah, I mean, okay, characters. I mean, Will's obviously a big character to talk about here. I mean, I think that's what I'm probably going to do now is maybe go through the characters a little bit more. As much as I would love to focus on some of the set pieces, which, you know, building the trap in the house in episode 3, setting up the crawl in episode 1, or in episode 4, the whole Great Escape thing, those are all really fun, great Stranger Things, like plan and execute style sequences, and more than just one sequence in a lot of cases. And they're a good time. But I think the characters here are the bigger thing that I probably need to focus on. So Will has a couple things going on here. Obviously, this idea that he's starting to feel it in the back of his neck again when stuff's going on. He realizes in episode 2 that he's seeing through the eyes of the victims. Particularly, he walks past Eric and he realizes that's what's happening there. And the questions start coming up about, okay, well, if you're connected and you even saw it like almost attack Joyce by the start of episode 4 through your eyes, Mike's the one who postures. What if you help stop it? What if you held it back? If you're in the hive mind and Vecna's pulling the strings, what if you're tapped in there now because you have this link to him? What if you also can send orders? What if you can also counteract what he's telling them to do? So they set that up, and it's like, and I love the pacing of this show, because like other shows would say that, and then it'd be like 5 episodes, maybe the end of the season when we finally get a payoff to that. No, we get a payoff to that by the end of episode 4. But what's really neat about it is that that's only like one side of the payoff here, right? And it's nice that it comes from Mike, because it shows you that Mike is giving him a pep talk. He does care about Will, but not maybe in the way that Will would really want him to. And that's the other side of this, is Will's sexuality, which has been hinted at now for a little bit. And here they do a really smart thing where they have it intersect with the Robin. This is one of the pairings that we get this season that we've not really had that much before, is Will and Robin, where Will catches her with her girlfriend at the hospital, who was introduced last season, and runs away. And, you know, she brings it up and she talks about keeping Anthony saw a secret and whatever, and he's just kind of awkward about it. But, you know, he does ask a question or two. I think this is in episode 2. But once we get to episode 4, and she sees the way Will looks at Mike, she recognizes that. And I think what I loved about this is, I don't know if I necessarily... Because Will's always been a little bit of a weaker character for me on this show. Purely just because in season 1, he was a MacGuffin. He was the thing they were trying to save. He wasn't really a character in and of himself. And even in season 2, it felt like they struggled to make him as entertaining as the others. And obviously he got possessed, so he kind of wasn't really himself then either. So it wasn't really until season 3 where we could start maybe spending a bit more time developing him beyond just he was the one who was kidnapped. Because even a lot of his stuff, and Joyce is still guilty of this, and they're kind of addressing it now where she's too protective and he's sick of being the kid who's just overly protected because it's too dangerous and I don't want to let my boy go. Although her reasoning when she talks about it is quite good actually, where she's like, hey, I didn't know you were gone for like 8 hours and I have felt eternally guilty and a horrible mother for that ever since. And that's why she's so protective. I'm like, her reasoning is sound. Like, it makes sense as a character. It just, you know, like, but I think the show overall has made him feel like that. Like, he's just the boy who was kidnapped back in season 1. And it wasn't until season 3 where we started to get a little bit of, oh, he's not growing up as quickly as the others. And that was good, you know. And I think last season they really hinted at his sexuality stuff. And that was, you know, solid enough. But I wasn't really sure I was that invested in it compared to a lot of the other characters. I'm like, okay, it's getting better. His story's getting better, but do I care? You know, is he as fun as Dustin or Lucas or Max or Elle or any of the other characters who are really fun to just watch do their thing and whatever? And I really like this pairing with him and Robin, because I think one of the weird things that they sort of put themselves into here, which I don't know, I wasn't sure how they were going to get out of it, was this idea that he clearly has feelings for Mike, but Mike has never shown anything remotely other than being straight, right? He's with Elle, that's the love of his life. We almost barely talk about the fact that they're in love with each other anymore because it's just like a thing that's been the case for ages now. I really like that Robin recognizes this moment, but also recognizes that it's a one-sided moment. And the advice she gives him, the story that she chooses to tell him as they're walking through the tunnels, and these are the tunnels from season 2, by the way. Those tunnels that were formed in season 2 with everything going on in that plot are the ones that are now being used to sneak around town. Again, it's cool that they're using things that were set up in previous seasons like that. Really neat. The story she tells, though, isn't of like her current girlfriend or even like realizing she's gay, and she's still not even said that out loud, I don't think. Really, she's not said that sentence, I believe. She tells the story of the girl she liked before, the one that Steve ended up with, and that, like, you know, upset her, and she talked about how, you know, oh, if I could get her to notice me, maybe if she feels the same way I do, I wouldn't feel so weird about how I feel. I'd be, you know, whatever. She goes on this great little speech, and she's basically given this speech about how it's not really about the other person to make you feel whole, it's about you feeling whole with yourself and comfortable with yourself and knowing who you are. And, you know, I'm not saying this word for word, I'm not even, I'm barely paraphrasing, but this is the gist of what she's getting at. And I really like that here, right, that, you know, and it's not so much that I was expecting some weird awkward scene where he tries to tell Mike his feelings or something and he'd reject him and it'd get all weird. I think I love that this feels a lot better handled than I think, because I loved how they handled Robin's stuff when that was revealed in season 3. I thought that was really neat and well done, and Steve's reaction to it was really sweet, and it really cemented their friendship in a really, really cool way. I think this here gave it a little bit more nuance where it's like, hey, part of this growing up for you as someone who isn't straight is coming to terms with, one, that you're not straight, but also the idea that you're going to be latching on to people who aren't like you. And it's not, and it's, you know, obviously everyone has rejections, everyone has people that they're attracted to that want nothing to do with them, but there's not even like a chance of it with certain people when you're like, you know, when you're gay, because like they're just not gay, and it's not even whether or not they like you or are attracted to you. It's not even like a question or on the table. It's just a hard cut off. And I love, and I'm saying this as someone who's straight, by the way. Like, this feels like it's coming from a very thoughtful place. I don't know how many, like, you know, LGBT like writers are on the staff or who's like inputting on this, but this felt like a really positive message that she gives him that then obviously pays into the payoff with the ending, with both like the advice Mike gave him, but also this advice she gives him, where he's able to fully realize and like save everyone at the end. And you know what's about to happen at the end of the episode, because once the Great Escape thing's foiled and all the Demogorgons start showing up to steal all these kids, the military try to fight them. It goes horribly, as you'd expect. We get a pretty nice long one-hour at one point during all this where chaos is going on. And Vecna, you know, gets his big entrance here. Now, we've seen him as Henry talking to Holly, and we've seen him in his suit as a normal person. But they kind of saved Vecna, barring the flashback at the start of episode 1. They kind of like saved, like, there was a genuine sense of like, where is Vecna, right? Even if I don't believe he's in the military base in the Upside Down, where is he? So they really saved his appearance here for a big entrance where you see his silhouette coming through the gate, and he, you know, comes through, and he basically tells Will, like, hey, you're a failure. Like, where, you know, I can't remember the exact wording, but it's like, you know, I tried to do great things with you and you instantly buckled. Which is what makes me think he's doing effectively the same thing. Like, I think he's using the 12 children that he's eventually going to have to fuel his Matrix-like dream world, you know, or reshape the Upside Down entirely. Because that was one thing they revealed, right, back in the last season or two, was that the Upside Down, like, before Will was taken, didn't look like Hawkins, and it's not evolving like Hawkins is. It's stuck exactly like it was when it was created, and maybe that's because Vecna took that from Will's mind or whatever, so maybe he's going to be using all of these children. Like, one's not enough, he needs 12 or something, and maybe there's something particularly special about them, but he kind of throws this in Will's face, and like he's nothing. Joyce does get a cool moment where she tries to stand up to him and gets thrown to the side. I did see someone complain about plot armor here, about why wouldn't Vecna just kill Joyce or kill Will even. Well, I think he was going to kill them. He leaves the Demigorgons to kill them. That's what the next part is. It just so happens that Will, taps into his power and stops it from happening. He stops it here with the Demigorgon attacking Mike. There's one attacking Lucas in the tunnels. He stops that. He stops the one attacking Robin. He stops them all. His eyes go white. They roll back into his head, and he basically kills all the Demigorgons the exact same way that Vecna was killing teenagers last season, by making them float in the air, making their arms, legs, and eventually neck all snap, and they drop to the floor, and he's got a nosebleed at the end, does Will, and it feels like a big, he just leveled up, he's got powers, kinda. I say kinda because I don't think he's just got the powers of El, even though the nosebleed does kinda connect them, obviously. It's definitely a visual signifier. But it feels a little bit different to me, that he's just kind of controlling stuff because he's connected to the hive mind. Having said that, I did also think about the fact that, all the other subjects, right, numbers, 2 through whatever, how many subjects there were, 11 being the one we know the most, is their powers all came from experimentations because they had Vecna to start with, right? I do wonder if him being connected to Vecna the way he was for so long. And it's worth mentioning that the whole tentacle thing getting into his mouth is exactly what the other kids look like when we see them, when Will's got a vision of them being trapped in whatever weird gooey prison they're actually in, because they don't see that. They're seeing whatever fantasy world Vecna's built for them, but or the world that he built for himself, I guess, more accurately. But anyway, I think that there's maybe an argument to say that if his powers were given to others, or to some extent via science, then maybe Will being connected to him the way he has for so long has let him tap into something. Now, whether that's something he'll get to keep if Vecna does get killed, or if it's something that's only there because of the hive mind, or it is something where he just has similar powers to El now, it's tough to say. But it's a big moment, it's a big payoff, it's a big full realization thing. It feels like Will did get a lion's share of big development in these first 4 episodes because they were building to this moment. And credit to the writers, they knew where the breaks were coming. I think they chose when the gaps were, and they knew, episode 4's got a big thing to, leave them on, right? And I feel like the same is going to be true for the end of episode 7. It was the same last season when they split it in 2, and the end of episode 5, which was, or 6, whatever the last one was, before the break, that was the big reveal of who Vecna was, right? So they know to leave us on something very juicy, and that's very much what this moment was with Will at the end. Really, really cool. And obviously that episode's called Sorcerer. Just the titles of these, for the record, are episode 1, The Crawl, 2 is The Vanishing of Holly Wheeler, 3 is The Turnbow Trap, and then 4 is Sorcerer. So, God, yeah, I guess that's well talked about. And mostly good stuff. I never been my favorite character, but they're doing some interesting stuff here, where at least from a plot perspective, and that's always kind of how he's been used, as kind of a gear in the plots more than a character. But I think this season they've done a good job of feeding into a little bit of his real world experience, and having Robin kind of be this mentor, or someone who's went through kind of some of the same process that he's going through, but is on the other side of it and can talk and give advice, is really sweet. And I think the more connections between characters that feel sweet, the better the show is in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of that going on in this season. All right, what else? What else should we talk about? Dustin's getting beat up by the bullies, the basketball team, and he kind of provokes them. He calls his snake Jake, which I have to assume is a reference to Jake the Snake, the wrestler. Hell, Rockin' Robin might even be a reference to the wrestler, but I feel like that one's a bit more she's a DJ. It makes sense to put Rockin' in front of her name because it would be alliterate, or alliteration, not illiterate, alliterate. I'll just say alliteration because it sounds like I'm saying illiterate if I say that. But yeah, I think that is it's a fun enough plot. He ends up missing the crawl, and arguably they have some trouble tracking the signal because he's not there. So he's got some guilt, but he's refusing to admit that he was beat up, right? By the bullies. He doesn't tell them that. Steve clearly can tell that that's what's happened. And him and Steve are bickering a lot. They're like an old married couple at this point. And a lot of it is Dustin's fault. Dustin's been kind of a shithead to him and constantly calling him dumb for not knowing how to do things and so on. We also, speaking of Steve, have the love triangle kind of developing, or has been developing with him and Jonathan and Nancy, where they're kind of dick measuring a little bit by who's going to fix things or do the more impressive thing early on. Jonathan's got an engagement ring hidden. We see that at one point as well. Honestly, the love triangle part of it is obviously not like necessarily my focus. I do think Steve being competitive is a little bit fun though, so I'm not necessarily mad at that. I feel like everyone watching now is kind of rooting for one over the other to a certain point. I love them all working together at the radio station, having their kind of their hidden messages in the phone call, the radio song rather, not the phone call. I think that stuff's good time. Oh, actually, just to backtrack to one thing I mentioned earlier, we got introduced to Erica, and she's in her class with the science teacher from the first couple seasons. I would like to point out here, there is no way they put a scene in discussing the theory of a wormhole without that being relevant later on. That is Chekhov's wormhole, kinda. It's foreshadowing, is what I'm trying to say. There's going to be wormholiness happening by the end of this season. I guarantee it. I know Max kinda like saw some time travel-y stuff because she was in the memories, but she wasn't actually time traveling, of course. Speaking of, I did love Robin using the flux capacitor as something that Joyce wouldn't understand, and then everyone else's reaction to it. I especially loved it because we know that she's seen that movie, and like I love the idea that everyone went back and saw that movie at some point after like their half viewing of it, and they're all like aware of it, but Joyce isn't, and she sounds a bit silly. What else do we got to talk about here? We have, I guess Elle and Hopper are the other big ones. There's a lot of like her training early on. That's who the military are looking for. They really want Elle. Linda Hamilton's Dr. K really wants her to complete whatever she's doing. And those two characters end up getting saddled together. Hopper ends up on his own inside the Upside Down because the military truck he sneaks into gets attacked. So Elle actually runs into the Upside Down to chase after the Demogorgon after Holly's taken. And Nancy's like, hey, just go get my sister. And she like runs for it. So we have that going on. So there's a lot of like kind of bickering but bonding with them and him trusting her more and that kind of thing. There's a big fleshy wall that's like the circumference of the Upside Down. Like there's like a sort of outer wall circle. And they think that Holly might be beyond that wall, but it's a bit unclear how true that is. It's just kind of theorizing for the most part now. I guess the Ellie, whatever calls her Ellie, actually. I am just mixing words up here. Elle and Hopper's plotline, though, which ends up being them, like, kidnapping one of the soldiers to question him, and that's how they find out about the base. She does her whole mind invasion thing. That stuff is, it's all right. I think it's entertaining. I do think it makes sense from a character point of view to give them some like one-on-one time because they've been a strong pair since season 2. The whole father-daughter thing going on, and Hopper seemingly be willing to go out with a bang to save her or protect her from bad people. He's having more flashbacks to his daughter's death, all that kind of thing. I will say, 11 just straight up snapping soldiers' necks did catch me a little bit off guard. I'm like, oh shit, she ain't pulling punches, she's just doing it. All right, fair enough. But yeah, like there's a whole thing where she has to jump into, and she's sort of using her powers to make herself jump higher. And I said at the end of last season, I think she's going to fly by the end of season 5. And I'm still thinking that, frankly. Like, why can't she just keep herself in the air for an extreme number of time? We'll see if they do it. But they do a whole sort of breaking and entering thing here. And it's a fun sequence. It all looks like it's going bad because they've got these like sonic blaster things set up everywhere to nullify Elle. But they ultimately get out of it, and that builds up to the big reveal of Callie being the one that they've got locked up. And that's where we leave their plot at this part. Also worth mentioning that by the time we get to like episode 4, Jonathan, Steve, Dustin, and Nancy drive into the Upside Down. They chase a Demogorgon. There's a whole fun sequence where they're chasing the Demogorgon through the streets with a tracking device, and they're like going through the back gardens, which actually was kind of foreshadowed bizarrely. Like earlier in the episode when Steve, this was in episode 3, this would have been, Steve and Dustin are bickering about making like the van faster because it's not keeping up with how fast the Demogorgon can travel. And as Dustin defiantly drills into Steve's good car to put the antenna in for the tracker, and Steve's begging him not to, it's the music from Ferris Bueller's Day Off that's playing while he's doing that, which just felt like a cheeky track to use in the moment. But later on, when they're chasing the Demogorgon, they have to drive through a bunch of back gardens, which is kind of a famous scene from that movie where he's running through the various houses. So I think that was an intentional choice in that part to do that. So yeah, so they're in the Upside Down. There's not tons of them actually in episode 4. Once they like decide to go looking or whatever, because they're kind of hanging around waiting for Hopper and Elle, but Elle and Hopper are busy with the whole army base. They basically disappear from the episode at a certain point, and I'm sure we'll pick up with them next time. But they get a lot of time in episodes 1, 2, and 3, so I'm not really complaining. There's a lot to get to, and obviously we have the whole Max subplot in episode 4, which I guess I should talk a bit more about that. I brought up that it's the weakest element because it's her just telling stuff to another character and these little flashbacks, but there is some interesting stuff here. Holly being kept in Vecna's house, but it's all nice like it was in the 50s. She thinks everything's fine. She thinks she's alone now, for a start. That's a reference to the Tiffany song that she's listening to. But someone leaves her a message to go and find something in the woods, even though Vecna was very adamant not to go into the woods. Like, you stay here. You don't go there. But she goes out looking, and the big reveal at the end of episode 3 is Max is there. And it's a whole thing, and the only thing we've seen of her so far is lying in the hospital bed. Lucas is playing Kate Bush on repeat, trying to get her to wake up. Here, when she starts revealing stuff, though, right, there are some interesting things here. This idea that this cave that she's hiding in is a memory that Vecna won't go into because he's terrified of it is interesting. I'm sure that'll have payoff at some point. I think the bigger thing here is Max bonding with young Holly, and then ultimately saying, hey, he can't know that we're up to something and that you're onto who he actually is. So Holly is like, wait, you want me to go back and chill with him? And she's like, yeah, you kind of need to for this to work. You can be brave, you can whatever. And so Holly ultimately ends up agreeing. But I did like parts of this. I liked Max saying, hey, what were my options when I got here? Did I try and get out? And she does. She actually tries to follow the music when she hears it. And she's basically in the exact same place she was back in that famous scene in season 4 where she ran out of the dream to round up that hill. But it disappeared because the song stopped playing and she couldn't get out, and Vecna showed up and gave her a chase. And then this cave ended up in the only place where he would not go. So, and I think, for the most part, the effects in the show look really good. There's the odd little moment where it's a bit green screen looking. I think one of the more standout things is this cave. Not the interior, because that's mostly a set, but I think the outside of the cave where you're just seeing the big rock cliff face, I think that looks a little bit, digital in a way that it doesn't feel quite right. Credit to them. They're doing these big mammoth-sized episodes that feel like they've got the budgets of, major Hollywood movies, so I can't really fault them that much because most of it ends up looking really good. But there's the odd moment in the Upside Down where you can sort of just tell that they're standing in front of a green screen, and it's fine. But worth pointing out if I'm going to point the little things out. So yeah, I think Max was always going to be someone who was kept separate and then came into the plot at some point. Now, obviously, I think most people would have assumed that was going to be her waking up at some point during the story, and I'm sure she will eventually. But this idea that she's where the other kids are, or at least one of the kids are, maybe she'll find the other kids. Maybe they'll go looking and they'll find the other kids that are already hooked up to this mind flare matrix device or whatever we're calling it. Actually, there is a name for it, actually, because she named it after something from A Wrinkle in Time. the Kamazots. Is that how you pronounce that? She said that at one point to Max. I mean, I think there's a lot of potential here, especially now that they've got the explanation out the way, and it's going to be them working together. And Vecna, no doubt, is going to notice something that tips them off. I think she dropped the telescope in the woods. Maybe that'll tip him off or something. But now that they've actually starting to form plans and do stuff, because again, I come back to this: the characters in Stranger Things are constantly trying to like solve their problems. Like, okay, what can we do? Can we look for something here? Can we fight something here? There's a constant proactive quality to the way they write these characters that feels very snappy. It never feels that they're just content to just sit there. Like, so many shows, like especially modern like streaming shows, like have characters just drawing things out for episodes with endless back and forth. And this show is setting things up, it's paying them off in the same episode a lot of the time. It feels like big, meaty, like plot developments are happening by the end of each episode. It feels like, you know, the characters have got arcs and they're evolving in different ways throughout. Some get a bit more time than others. Some get like, you know, better stories than others. I think the idea that Mike and Nancy are getting kind of a maturity thing this season, where it's like less about like, you know, her relationship to Jonathan and his relationship to Elle, and more about the fact that they need to go and like save their little sister and be the parents of the family effectively for the sake of the story, is a good like coming of age growing up bit for them, right? There's a real nice thing to this show where like now we don't like Joyce and Hopper don't even question all the teenagers being involved in a lot of the plans. Like, sure, Hopper's taken the most dangerous tasks, but other than, again, Will, who's been kept in Elle to an extent because like, oh, no one can see her because the military are looking for her. No, they're doing stuff. They're part of the plans. They're part of the lookouts. They're all involved in what's going on. And to some extent, they're looking out for the younger generation. And, you know, Erica sticks around as well, of course, once she's introduced, and she's on the lookout during the whole Great Escape segment. Yeah, I mean, just a good time all around. Like, I'm just, like, there's a constant energy to Stranger Things. The characters, 99% of them are a blast to be around. And yeah, like, Vecna probably is one of the weaker elements in that he himself as a villain is just the villain. But because of the problems that he's created for all the other characters to solve, I don't think it matters that much that he's not the most compelling thing ever. Like, I mean, season 1, it was just the Demogorgon, and it wasn't even really a character, it was just a monster. There was a simplicity to it. And I think ultimately what's important to me in this show is that it's just a variety of different things that the characters have to figure out and solve, and watching them work together as a team and show up and save each other at the last minute and have the big action sequences where Mike's trying to lead the kids around as the military are all getting killed by Demogorgons. Like, that stuff is like top notch, and it's so engrossing to watch. The pacing is really good. That any little faults or like a subplot here or there that feels a little bit floundery or is a bit clunky in the case of the Max story, where she's just kind of telling us what happened to her in the most uninteresting way possible, they're relatively minor overall because the show is very, very tight and good by and large. And it almost feels like they just didn't think of a better way of doing that, and they had to get all that information out by the end of episode 4 because they've got stuff to do that's more interesting than episode 5 and so on. So I just don't think that the faults here are that big of a deal. And for the most part, it feels like Stranger Things. It feels a little bit darker. We see soldiers get like a Demogorgon claw right through his eyes. It looks very brutal. And that stuff is great as well. Like, there's just, and you know, I'm like, you know, like Lucas, like what's he got going? I mean, he's mostly just concerned about Max and he's helping the others, but again, he's very useful in the team. Like when they're doing the Great Escape bit and it's like, oh shit, we're sneaking kids one by one out through the bathroom that we've dug up through, and the water's starting to go, so they're trying to like deal with that. Really good stuff. Like I couldn't have asked for much better. Like, other than just a couple of little faults that I've explained, I don't know if I could have asked for much better for a kickoff to this final season, because it feels like, unlike some other seasons where it kind of eases into what the story is, where it'll, you know, the first episode will be quite quiet. Episode 1 of this season, no, they've already got a goal. They're already trying to stop Vecna. They're already trying to do this, and then obviously new things evolve from there. And they immediately rank up the tension by the end of episode 1 by having the innocents in their lives that aren't a part of this get attacked, right? That was always something in the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. If you had a vampire, especially in the first few seasons, go after Buffy's mum Joyce, right? If you had that happen, then it felt like more severe. Like someone who didn't know about this world of vampires and demons was getting attacked felt a bit more like sinister. It felt a bit more threatening because they didn't know about it. So having like the Wheeler family members who are all not involved in the Stranger Things going ons, having to fight for their lives and see Karen level up and try and take it on, and young Holly being now the victim and the new Will. And that was actually another scene that I really liked with Will, was Will saying, hey, I know what it's like to be kidnapped like this. I want to save her. And I don't care if I'm putting myself at risk to do so. I can relate to her in a way that no one else out here can. I'm going to do what it takes, even if it puts me in danger. Like, again, I thought that was a really good moment for him. Leveling up, being more heroic. And yeah, so really, really good stuff. Music's on point as always, both the score and the songs they throw in there. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm looking forward to Dustin maybe getting over his angst stretch here a little bit and maybe making up with Steve. I'm sure that'll be a sweet moment if and when it happens, or a tragic moment if one of them's dying, which, we're in the final season. It could be happening. Absolutely could be happening. Plus, it was a nice idea of like Will taking the pain. So if you compare his kidnapping to like a child being, going through something traumatic or being abused or something like that, and then later him finding strength and like not being defined by it but turning it around to help others in need, there's kind of a nice positive message in there as well, which I really like. Stranger Things is back for its final season, and I'm excited that I get to do this another 2 times. One for the next batch of 3 episodes on Christmas, and then the finale, which who knows how long that finale is going to be, because the finale last season was like 2.5 hours, something like that. It was a beefy one. So we'll see how long these last batch of episodes end up being. But yeah. Again, lots of little funny moments, little character bit moments that I've probably glossed over, and there's probably more theorizing I could do about what Linda Hamilton's up to or whatever. But yeah, we'll see. So yeah, let me know what you thought of the first 4 episodes of Stranger Things Season 5 in the comments. You can like, subscribe, all that stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep all the reviews coming. Or you can be a YouTube member. That also helps. It's an alternate way of doing it if you like. Check out MailFuzz Movies, where all the movie podcasts live, including a sci-fi movie podcast, which might be of interest if you like Stranger Things. But that is me. Thank you very much for joining me. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?